The hospital froze when the dog walked in, but what he was carrying shocked everyone. The hospital froze when the dog walked in, but what he was carrying shocked everyone. With his injured body and eyes fixed straight ahead, he was dragging something on his shoulders. No one knew what he wanted, but the scene was impossible to ignore. What happened next will leave you speechless. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. A deafening noise of St. Catherine's Hospital ceased as if someone had turned off the sound of the world. It was a Monday morning like any other, until the automatic doors opened with their usual metallic hiss, but what came through them made everyone present question whether they were awake or experiencing an impossible dream. A golden-coated dog, covered in mud and dried blood, crossed the main hall with firm, determined steps. On its back, a girl of approximately 8 years old remained unconscious, her small arms hanging beside the exhausted body of the animal. The dog's paws left red tracks on the immaculate white floor, its ribs protruding through the soaked fur, but its brown eyes remained fixed on a single objective: to reach someone who could save the child. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who had worked in UCI pediatric emergency for 15 years, felt as if she were watching a science fiction movie. She had never witnessed anything like this in her entire medical career. The animal seemed to understand exactly where it was and what it needed to do. It didn't bark, showed no aggression, just positioned itself in the center of the corridor and waited, as if it knew its mission was almost complete. The first to react was Nurse Betty, a robust woman in her early 50s who had seen everything in that hospital. She approached the dog cautiously, speaking in a low, reassuring tone. To her surprise, the animal allowed her to approach the girl, but its eyes never stopped following every movement. It was as if it had made a silent agreement with destiny and was now supervising each step of that process. Sarah rushed to examine the child. Weak but present pulse, irregular breathing, multiple bruises on her body, and evident signs of severe dehydration. While the medical team mobilized to transfer the girl to a stretcher, the dog remained motionless, carefully observing each procedure. Its paws trembled from exhaustion, but it refused to lie down or accept any kind of care until it was sure the little one was safe. The girl was quickly taken to the emergency room, and that's when something extraordinary happened. The dog tried to follow them, but when the doors closed, it simply positioned itself outside and lay down. It didn't whimper, didn't scratch the door, didn't cause any disturbance. It just waited, like a silent guardian fulfilling a mission that only it completely understood. The next few hours were a whirlwind of medical activity. The girl was stabilized, received intravenous hydration, and underwent a series of tests. She showed signs of physical and emotional trauma, but nothing that would irreversibly compromise her life. Throughout this period, the dog remained in the same spot, refusing food, water, or any attempt at veterinary care. Dr. Sarah observed the situation with growing fascination. There was something supernatural about the connection between these two beings. When the girl's monitors indicated changes in her vital signs, the dog reacted even before the machines emitted any alert sound. It would raise its head, its ears, would perk up, and it would become visibly agitated, as if it could feel each irregular heartbeat of the child through the hospital walls. The hospital director, Dr. Richard Morgan, arrived after receiving an urgent call about the unusual situation. A practical and objective man, he initially showed skepticism regarding reports about the animal's almost human behavior. However, upon personally witnessing the dog's reaction during a small respiratory crisis of the girl, when it began to whine and scratch the floor exactly 3 minutes before the monitors went off, Dr. Richard found himself forced to acknowledge that he was facing something that defied his medical and scientific understanding. Meanwhile, social worker Heather Robinson had already been called to handle the girl's case. A dedicated woman, experienced in situations of child trauma, Heather immediately recognized the signs that the child had gone through a severe traumatic experience. The bruises on her body suggested struggle. The scratches on her arms indicated she had run through dense vegetation, and her general state pointed to days of deprivation and fear. The investigation into the origin of the pair began immediately. Authorities were contacted, and a search team was sent to scour the forested region surrounding the city, following the direction from which the dog had appeared. The animal had no collar, identification chip, or any sign that could indicate its origin. It was as if it and the girl had simply materialized from nowhere. During the night, the girl showed the first sign of consciousness. Her eyes opened slowly, and the first thing she did was search for something. Her small fingers moved over the hospital sheet, as if seeking a familiar texture. That's when Sarah had an intuition. She asked for the dog to be brought to the window of the room where the girl could see it. The effect was instant and touching. The child's eyes lit up, and for the first time since her arrival, she sketched something that could be interpreted as a smile. The dog, on the other side of the glass, wagged its tail timidly and placed its paw on the transparent surface, as if wanting to touch the girl's face. At that moment, everyone present understood that they were witnessing something much greater than a simple rescue. It was a connection that transcended any logical explanation. Questions multiplied with each passing hour. How had that dog found the girl? How long had they been together? What had happened in the forest? And most importantly, who was responsible for the state in which the child had been found? The answers seemed as distant as the stars, but Sarah was sure of one thing. That dog wasn't just an animal that had found a lost child by chance. There was a much deeper and more complex story waiting to be discovered, and she was determined to unravel it, no matter how long it took. The early morning brought the first clues about the mystery surrounding the girl and her four-legged protector. The search and rescue team had returned from the forest with disturbing evidence: an improvised camp, a torn tarp that had served as a precarious shelter, bloodstains already dried by time, and, more worryingly, clear signs of struggle and desperate escape. Investigator Carl Anderson, a veteran in missing persons cases, carefully studied the photographs taken at the site. On one of the trees, they found a rudimentary inscription made with stone or pointed metal, a small heart next to a canine paw print. It wasn't a meaningless childish scribble, but a message left purposefully, as if the girl knew that someone would eventually find that place. Dr. Sarah had spent the entire night at the hospital, alternating between caring for her small patient and the fascinating observation of the dog's behavior. During the early hours of the morning, she witnessed something that intrigued her even more. When the girl began having nightmares, moving restlessly in the hospital bed and emitting low moans of anguish, the dog outside the room became visibly agitated, walking in circles and staring fixedly at the door as if it wanted to go through it. Heather, the social worker, arrived early, bringing a preliminary report that only deepened the mystery. There were no records of missing children in the region that matched the girl's description. Her clothes, although dirty and torn, were of good quality, suggesting she didn't come from a family in extreme social vulnerability. Even more intriguing was the fact that her small hands had calluses indicating heavy work, inappropriate for a child her age. The first attempt at communication with the girl happened during the morning, when she finally woke up completely. Sarah approached slowly, speaking in a soft and comforting tone. The child observed her with large, frightened eyes, but didn't show extreme fear, just a natural caution of someone who had learned to distrust unknown adults. When Sarah asked her name, the girl only pointed to the window where the dog patiently waited. It was evident that, for her, identity was completely connected to the animal that had saved her. Subsequent attempts at communication revealed that the child perfectly understood what was said, but refused to speak or provide any information about her origin or what had happened in the forest. Veterinarian Dr. Paul Henry was called to examine the dog, which had finally accepted basic medical care. The animal was malnourished and dehydrated, had multiple cuts on its paws, and showed signs of extreme exhaustion. Even more surprising was the discovery that it wasn't a common mutt, but a purebred golden retriever, probably with specialized training, considering its exceptional discipline and obedience. During the examination, Dr. Paul found something that would completely change the course of the investigation: a small surgical scar in the neck region of the animal, exactly where identification chips are implanted. However, there was no chip. The scar suggested that the device had been surgically removed, and not long ago, considering the still recent appearance of the mark. This discovery raised even more disturbing questions. Why would someone remove the identification chip from an obviously valuable and well-trained dog? The most likely answer was that both the animal and the girl were fleeing from someone or some situation, and the chip could reveal their location. The afternoon brought an unexpected twist. An anonymous call to the local police station reported a vehicle theft in the forest region. Approximately at the same time, the girl and the dog had appeared at the hospital. The vehicle was found abandoned a few miles from the city, with signs that it had been used hastily and then abandoned. In the glove compartment, investigators found fake documents and a map of the region with several routes marked, as if someone had carefully planned different escape options. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a touching dynamic began to develop. The SAS girl had started drawing in a notebook that Heather had brought for her. Her drawings were revealing, figures of shadowy adults with hidden faces, a large dark house, and always in all drawings, the golden figure of the dog by her side, like a constant protector amid the chaos of her traumatic memories. Dr. Sarah noticed that the child always drew with her left hand, but ate and performed other activities with her right. When gently questioned about this, the girl showed her left hand, revealing a small scar between the thumb and index finger, another clue suggesting a history of suffering and adaptation. The dog, in turn, had established a rigid routine. It remained alert during the day, always positioned to have a complete view of the corridor and entrances to the floor. During the night, it relaxed slightly, but never slept deeply. It was as if it kept constant guard against a threat that only it could perceive. The connection between the two became more evident with each hour. When the girl was calm, the dog also appeared relaxed. When she became agitated or frightened, it immediately went into a state of alert, as if they shared not only a history, but also a nervous system synchronized by the traumatic experiences they had lived through together. Heather began to suspect that this wasn't just a case of a lost child, but something much more complex and possibly dangerous. The way the girl reacted to certain sounds, especially heavy footsteps in the corridor or deeper male voices, suggested that she had been conditioned by fear. And the dog clearly had been trained not only to protect but to hide and flee when necessary. The pieces of the puzzle began to form, but the resulting image was more disturbing than anyone had initially imagined. It wasn't just a rescue story, but a desperate escape from something or someone that represented a real and present threat. And both the girl and the dog knew that, despite being temporarily safe, the true battle for freedom was just beginning. The third day brought a discovery that would change the entire course of the investigation. Dr. Sarah arrived at the hospital in the morning and found the girl in a state of extreme agitation, insistently pointing to the window. Outside, the dog was visibly disturbed, barking softly and staring fixedly at the main entrance of the hospital. Its behavior was completely different from the vigilant calm it had demonstrated in previous days. Investigator Carl Anderson received an urgent call from his team. The security camera images from a gas station near the forest had been analyzed, and what they found was disturbing. A middle-aged man driving a dark pickup truck had stopped at the location 3 times in the last week, always asking about a girl and a dog that might have passed through the region. His questions were too insistent to be coincidence. Heather had achieved a small breakthrough in communication with the child. Through drawings and gestures, she discovered that the girl's name was Lily, although she still refused to speak. Lily's drawings became more specific and revealing. A large house surrounded by high walls, dark rooms with barred windows, and always the presence of threatening male figures. In one of the most detailed drawings, she had represented the dog wearing a special kind of collar, different from common collars. Dr. Paul Henry, intrigued by the description of the collar in the drawing, decided to investigate the animal's past more deeply. He sent photographs of the dog to contacts in specialized training organizations and professional training centers. The response came faster than expected and was completely unexpected. The animal matched the description of a personal guard dog that had disappeared 6 months ago from a rural property in the interior of the state. The property belonged to Jack Morrison, a businessman known for his questionable dealings and for maintaining an extremely reserved lifestyle. Officially, Morrison ran a transport company, but there were persistent rumors about illicit activities involving his rural property. The dog, according to records, was named Max and had been acquired specifically to protect the Morrison family. This revelation opened a new and terrible possibility. Lily could be a daughter or relative of Jack Morrison, and both she and Max had fled from the rural property for reasons that still needed to be discovered. The removal of the dog's identification chip now gained a much more sinister meaning, suggesting careful planning to escape from a captivity situation. Sarah decided to try a different approach with Lily. She brought a tablet with images of different rural environments, houses and landscapes, carefully observing the girl's reactions. When a photo of a property with characteristics similar to those described in Lily's drawings appeared on the screen, the child had an immediate physical reaction. She began to tremble, her pupils dilated, and she instinctively looked for Max. Outside the room, Max also reacted to Lily's discomfort, even without being able to see her directly. He began to walk in circles, his ears constantly moving as if capturing sounds imperceptible to human ears, and his body posture indicated a state of maximum alert. It was evident that he perceived danger long before any human could identify it. Confirmation of the danger came in the form of a call to the hospital reception. A man with a deep, authoritative voice identified himself as Lily's father and demanded information about the girl's condition. He said he had hired private detectives to find her after her accidental disappearance during a walk on the family's rural property. His version of events was plausible and well-crafted, but something in his tone of voice alerted the receptionist, who immediately transferred the call to the hospital administration. Dr. Richard Morgan, the hospital director, received the call with growing caution. The man, who identified himself as Lily's father, knew details about the girl's condition that had not been publicly disclosed, but his questions were formulated in a way that suggested more interest in locating the child than genuine concern for her recovery. When Richard mentioned that the girl was being accompanied by a social worker due to the traumatic nature of her rescue, the man became visibly irritated and abruptly hung up. Heather was immediately informed about the call and contacted the HE authorities. Her experience with cases of domestic and family violence told her that this was not a situation of a concerned father, but someone trying to recover what they considered their property. The speed with which the man had located Lily at the hospital, just 3 days after her arrival, suggested that he possessed considerable resources and contacts that allowed him to track movements even in a distant city. Lily, even without fully understanding the discussions of the adults around her, perceived that something had changed. Her drawings became more urgent and specific. She began to draw rudimentary maps showing escape routes, hiding places in the forest, and always, invariably, Max by her side as guide and protector. In one of the most detailed drawings, she represented a night scene where she and the dog ran through the woods, with dark figures pursuing them with flashlights. Dr. Sarah made a decision that would change her professional and personal life forever. After consulting with Heather and Dr. Richard, she decided that Lily and Max could not be separated and that both needed special protection. Using her medical authority, she declared that separation between the child and the animal could cause severe setback in her psychological recovery, making it necessary for Max to remain close as part of the therapeutic treatment. This decision triggered a series of complex bureaucratic protocols. The hospital needed to create special accommodations, hire additional security, and establish specific procedures for cases of external threat. More importantly, Heather initiated legal proceedings to question the identity of Lily's supposed father and investigate the real circumstances of her disappearance. During the night, Max demonstrated aggressive behavior for the first time since His arrival at the hospital. He growled low toward the corridor window, his fur bristled, and he adopted a defensive posture typical of guard dogs in situations of real threat. The hospital security guards, alerted by the animal's behavior, made a complete sweep of the surroundings but found nothing visibly suspicious. However, the next morning, security cameras revealed that Max had correctly detected the presence of a threat. A man had been filmed observing the hospital from a distance during the early morning, using binoculars and making notes in a notebook. His appearance vaguely matched the description provided by the gas station: middle-aged, authoritative posture and an obsessive interest in locating Lily and Max. The hunt had officially begun, and everyone at the hospital knew they were protecting much more than an injured girl and her dog. They were defending two survivors of a situation that promised to become much more dangerous before finding a resolution. And Max, with his sharp instincts and unwavering loyalty, would be the first line of defense against what was to come. The early morning of the fourth day brought the confrontation everyone feared, but no one was prepared for the way it would unfold. Max had spent the entire night in a state of maximum alert, his ears capturing sounds that seemed imperceptible to humans. Around 3 in the morning, he began to whine softly, a sound that Sarah had never heard him make, loaded with an urgency that made her heart race. Lily, even while sleeping, reacted to her protector's discomfort. She began to move restlessly in bed, murmuring incomprehensible words, until she finally awoke with a start. For the first time since her arrival at the hospital, she spoke, whispering a single word that echoed like a warning cry. "He's coming." Jack Morrison had managed to infiltrate the hospital using fake documents and a stolen medical coat. His plan was simple: locate Lily during the early morning shift change, when vigilance would be more relaxed, and take her back to his rural property before anyone noticed her absence. However, he had completely underestimated the supernatural connection between Lily and Max. The dog detected Morrison's presence 3 corridors before he came near Lily's room. His behavior changed instantly, from vigilant protector to warrior in battle mode. He began to bark with an intensity and ferocity that alerted the entire floor, waking patients and mobilizing the security team. Sarah, who had decided to spend the night at the hospital due to her growing concerns, ran to Lily's room. She found the girl huddled in bed, trembling violently, while Max outside the door seemed to be literally trying to break the glass to reach her. It was evident that both felt the proximity of danger in a way that transcended normal senses. When Morrison finally reached the corridor where Lily was hospitalized, he found not only a furious dog, but an entire medical team mobilized and security guards already alerted. His attempt to maintain the facade crumbled instantly when Max launched himself against him with a fury that surprised all those present. The animal, even debilitated by wounds and exhaustion of recent days, fought with the strength of one defending not just a child, but his own reason for existing. The confrontation was brief but intense. Morrison tried to use a veterinary sedative he had brought to neutralize Max, but the dog was faster. Even injured from the clash, he managed to bite Morrison's arm, causing him to drop the sedative and definitely alerting security about his true intentions. When the police arrived, they found Morrison being restrained by hospital security, while Max, seriously injured, refused to let anyone approach until he was sure Lily was completely safe. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of shocking revelations. Jack Morrison was not Lily's father, but her captor. The girl had been kidnapped 2 years earlier from her biological family and kept captive on Morrison's rural property, where she was forced to work and lived in degrading conditions. Max had initially been trained to prevent escapes, but something extraordinary had happened. The dog had developed an emotional bond with Lily that overcame his original conditioning. The escape had been planned for months. Lily, despite her young age, had observed the surveillance patterns of the property and identified an opportunity during a storm that knocked down part of the electric fence. Max, instead of preventing her escape, had chosen to protect her, guiding her through the forest for 3 days and 3 nights until they reached the hospital. Dr. Sarah discovered that her intuition about the special connection between Lily and Max was correct, but in an even deeper way than she had imagined. Max wasn't just a dog that had become attached to the girl. He had literally chosen to abandon his training, his function, and his previous life to become the protector and companion of a child who desperately needed hope. Lily's biological family was located through missing persons records. Her parents, Karen and Edward Smith, had spent 2 years desperately searching for their daughter, never losing hope of finding her. When they received the call informing them that Lily had been found, the emotion was so intense that they needed medical assistance to be able to travel to the hospital. The reunion was a moment that would be forever etched in the memory of everyone present. Lily, who had remained practically mute during her hospitalization, pronounced a single word when she saw her parents. "Mommy." Karen fell to her knees beside the stretcher, embracing her daughter with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of her emotion, while Edward cried without being able to speak. However, the Smith family faced an unexpected dilemma. Lily categorically refused to separate from Max. For her, the dog wasn't just an animal that had saved her, but her family, her protector, and the only constant in a world that had become chaotic and frightening. Karen and Edward, initially hesitant to accept an animal into their lives, quickly understood that Max was non-negotiable. He was an essential part of their daughter's recovery. Doctor. Sarah became a passionate advocate for Max's permanence with the Smith family. She argued, based on solid medical and psychological evidence, that separating Lily from Max could cause a severe setback in her emotional recovery. More than that, she had personally witnessed the extraordinary connection between them and knew she was defending something sacred and irreplaceable. The process of legal adoption of Max by the Smith family was facilitated by the national media, which had discovered the story and transformed it into a symbol of hope and resistance. Donations came from across the country to cover medical and veterinary costs, as well as help the Smith family re-establish themselves after 2 years of searches that had consumed all their savings. 6 months later, Lily had become a completely different child. She attended therapy regularly, had resumed her studies, and most importantly, had regained her ability to trust adults. Max, completely recovered from his injuries, officially assumed the role of therapy dog, not only for Lily but for other children in traumatic situations at the same hospital where their journey had begun. Sarah, who had risked her career to protect Lily and Max, discovered that she had gained much more than she had lost. She became a specialist in cases of child trauma and animal-assisted therapy, being sought after by families from all over the country. More importantly, she had learned that some connections transcend logic and science, and that true love, whether between humans or between different species, is capable of overcoming any obstacle. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, Lily ran through the yard of her new home, Max running by her side with the energy of a puppy, despite his age and the scars he carried. Karen watched from the kitchen window, still becoming emotional, seeing her daughter laugh again. Edward was building a wooden house for Max, although he knew the dog would prefer to sleep next to Lily's bed, as he had done every night since they came home. Sometimes, Lily still had nightmares. But now, when she woke up frightened in the middle of the night, she only had to reach out her hand to feel Max's soft fur beside her. And in her child's heart, she knew she would never be alone again, because she had learned that true heroes don't always wear capes or fly through the sky. Sometimes they have 4 paws, a golden heart, and the courage to choose love above all else. End of the story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Lily and Max has touched your hearts as deeply as it touched ours. This journey of unconditional love, courage, and overcoming reminds us that, even in the darkest moments, hope can emerge in the most unexpected forms. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we've prepared a special playlist with equally touching and inspiring stories. You can find it by clicking here on the side. If this story moved you as much as it did us, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Every day we bring unique narratives that celebrate the strength of the human spirit and the extraordinary bonds we can form. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments, do you believe there is a special connection between animals and humans that goes beyond scientific explanation? We're eager to read your stories and